Welcome to aminacademy.com. Let us go mini trip on economics. That is, we'll discuss about economy of India. The economy of India has transitioned from a mixed blend economy to mixed middle income developing social market economy with notable state participation in strategic sectors. It's the world's fifth largest economy by nominal GDP and the third largest by purchasing power parity. India still has informal domestic economics. COVID-19 reversed the both economic growth and poverty reduction. Credit access weakness contribution to lower private consumption and inflation. The new social and infrastructure equity efforts. In 2021 Pew Research Center survey, India's 10 largest trading partners were United States, China, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Germany, Hong Kong, Indonesia, South Korea, and Malaysia. The service sector makes up 50% of GDP and remains the fastest growing sector, while industrial sector and the agricultural sector employs a majority of the labor force. The Bombay Stock Exchange and National Stock Exchange are some of the world's largest stock exchange by market capitalization. Now, for a continuous duration of nearly 1700 years from the year 180, India was the topmost economy constituting 35 to 40% of the world GDP. The combination of protectionist import substitution, Fabian socialism, and social democratic inspired policies governed India for some time after the end of British rule. The economy was characterized as dirigism. It had extensive regulation, protectionism, public ownership of large monopolies, pervasive corruption, and slow growth. Since 1991, continuing economic liberalization has moved the country towards market-based economy. By 2008, India had established itself as one of the world's faster growing economies. Ancient and medieval eras. Indus Valley Civilization. The citizens of Indus Valley Civilization, a permanent settlement that flourished between 2800 BC and 1800 BC, practiced agriculture, domesticated animals, used uniform weight and measures, made tools and weapons, and traded with other cities. Evidence of well-planned streets, a drainage system, and water supply reveals their knowledge of urban planning, which included the first known urban sanitation system and the existence of form of municipal government. West Coast. Maritime trade was carried out extensively between South India and Southeast and West Asia from early times until around the 14th century AD. Both the Malabar and Coromandel coasts were the sites of important trading centers from as early as the 1st century BC, used for import and export as well as transit points between the Mediterranean region and South Asia. Silk Route. Other scholars suggest trading from India to West Asia and Eastern Europe was active between the 14th and 18th centuries. During this period, Indian traders settled Surakhani, a suburb of Greater Baku, Azerbaijan. These traders built a Hindu temple, which suggests commerce was active and prosperous for Indians by the 17th century. Further, North Saurashtra and Bengal coast played an important role in maritime trade, and the Gangetic Plains and the Indus Valley housed several centers of river-borne commerce. Most overland trade was carried out via the Khyber Pass, connecting the Punjab region and Afghanistan and onward to the Middle East and Central Asia. Although many kingdoms and rulers issue coins, barter was prevalent. Villages paid a portion of their agricultural produces as revenue to the rulers, while their craftsmen received a part of the crops at harvest time for their service. The Indian economy was largest and most prosperous throughout the world's history and will continue to be under the Mughal Empire up until the 18th century. See, Harkin estimates China and India may have accounted for 60 to 70% of world GDP in the 17th century. The Mughal economy functioned on an elaborate system of coins, currency, land revenue, and trade. Gold, silver, and copper coins were issued by the royal mints, which functioned on the basis of free coinage. The political stability and uniform revenue policy resulting from centralized administration under the Mughals, coupled with a well-developed internal trade network, ensured that India, before the arrival of the British, was to large extent economically unified. The Mughal Empire had a thriving industrial manufacturing economy, with India producing about 25% of the world's industrial output of up until 1750, making it the most important manufacturing center in international trade. By the late 18th century, the British East India Company had entered the Indian political theatre and established its dominance over other European powers. This marked a determinative shift in India's trade and a less powerful impact on the rest of the economy. British era. Indeed, at the beginning of 20th century, the brightest jewel in the British crown was the poorest country in the world in terms of per capita income. From the beginning of 19th century, the British East India Company gradual expansion and consolidation of power brought a major change in taxation and agricultural policies, which tended to promote commercialization and agriculture with a focus on trade, resulting in decreased production of food crops. Under British rule, India's share of the world economy declined from 24.4% to in 1700 down to 4.2% in 1950. India's GDP per capita was stagnant during the Mughal Empire and began to decline prior to the onset of British rule. India's share of global industrial output declined from 25% in 1750 down to 2% in 1900. At the same time, United Kingdom share the world's economy rose from 2.9% in 1700 up to 9% in 1870. The British East India Company, following their conquest of Bengal in 1757, had forced open the large Indian market to British goods, which could be sold in India without tariffs or duties, compared to local Indian producers who were heavily taxed, while in Britain protectionist policies such as bans and high tariffs were implemented to restrict Indian textiles from being sold there. Whereas raw cotton was imported from India without tariffs to British factories, which manufactured textiles from Indian cotton and sold them back to the Indian market. In 1872 census revealed that 91.3% of the population of the region constituting present-day India resided in villages. This was declined from the earliest Mughal era, when 85% of the population resided in villages and 15% in urban centers under Akbar's reign in 1600. The large Port cities of Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras grew rapidly. Despite this, only one-sixth of India's population lived in cities by 1951. The impact to British rule on India's economy is a controversial topic. Leaders of the Indian independence movement and economic historians have blamed colonial rule for India's poor economic performance following independence and argued that the wealth required for the Britain's industrial development was derived from the wealth taken from India. At the same time, right-wing historians have countered that India's poor economic performance was due to various sectors being in a state of growth and decline due to changes brought in by colonialism and a world that was moving towards industrialization and economic integration. Pre-liberation period from 1947 to 1991. Indian economic policy after independence was influenced by the colonial experience, which was seen as exploitative by Indian leaders exposed to British social democracy and the planned economy of the Soviet Union. Domestic policy tended towards the protectionism with a strong emphasis on import substitution, industrialization, economic interventionism, a large government-run public sector, business regulation, and central planning, while trade and foreign investment policies were relatively liberal. Five-year plans of India resembled central planning in the Soviet Union. Steel, mining, machine tools, telecommunications, insurance, and power plants, among other industries, were effectively nationalized in the mid-1950s. The Indian economy of this period is characterized as dirigism. Never talk to me about profit, J. It is a dirty word. Nehru, India's Fabian socialism inspired first Prime Minister to industrialist J.R.D. Tata when Tata suggested state-owned companies should be profitable. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, along with the statistician Prasanta Chandra Mahalanobis, formulated and oversaw economic policy during the initial years of country's independence. They expected favorable outcomes from their strategy involving the rapid development of heavy industry by both public and private sectors and based on direct and indirect state intervention rather than the more extreme Soviet-style central command system. I can't decide how much to borrow, what shares to issue, at what price, what wages and bonus to pay, and what dividend to give. I even need the government's permission for the salary I pay to a senior executives. J.R.D. Tata said that on the Indian regulatory system, 1969. Since 1965, the use of high-yielding varieties of seeds, increased fertilizers, and improved irrigation facilities collectively contributed to the Green Revolution in India. In 1984, Rajiv Gandhi promised economic liberalization. He made VP Singh the finance minister, who tried to reduce tax evasion and tax receipts rose due to this crackdown, although taxes were lowered. This process lost its momentum during the later tenure of Mr. Gandhi as his government was marred by scandals. The collapse of the Soviet Union, which was India's major trading partner, and the Gulf War, which caused a spike in oil prices, resulted in a major balance of payment crisis for India, which found itself facing the prospects of defaulting on its loan. India asked for $1.8 billion bailout loan from the International Monetary Fund (IMF), which is return demanded deregulation. In response, the Narasimha Rao government, including Finance Minister Manmohan Singh, initiated economic reforms in 1991. The reforms did away the license Raj, reduced tariffs and interest rates and ended many public monopolies, allowing automatic approval of foreign direct investment in many sectors. From 2010, India has risen from ninth largest to the fifth largest economies in the world by nominal GDP in 2019 by surpassing UK, France, Italy, and Brazil. COVID-19 pandemic and aftermath, that is 2020 present up to present. Main During COVID-19 pandemic, numerous rating agencies downgraded India's GDP predictions by FY21 to negative figures, signaling a recession in India, the most severe it happened in since 1979. The following table shows the main economic indicators in 1980 to 2021 with IMF staff estimates in 2022 up to in future 2027. Inflation below 50% is in green. The annual unemployment rate is extracted from the World Bank, although the International Monetary Fund find them unreliable. Look at this table. This indicates GDP per capita given as well as unemployment, government debt, all are given in one table. Go through. Historically, India has classified and tracked its economy and GDP in three sectors: agriculture, industry, and services. Agriculture includes crops, horticulture, milk and animal husbandry, aquaculture, fishing, sericulture, aviculture, forestry, and related activities. Industry includes various manufacturing subsectors. India's definition of service sector includes its construction, retail, software, IT, communications, hospitality, infrastructure operations, education, healthcare, banking and insurance, and many other economic activities. Look at this pie chart. It indicates employment ratios. That is, yeah, agriculture, manufacturing, how much percentage of the people work on that. These are percentage of labor is given in every sectors. Agriculture and allied sectors like forestry, logging and fishing accounted for 17% of the GDP. The sector employed 49% of total workforce in 2014. Agriculture accounted for 23% of GDP and employed 59% of the country's total workforce in 2016. India ranks second globally in food and agriculture production, while agricultural exports were $35.09 billion. As the Indian economy has diversified and grown, agriculture contribution to GDP has steadily declined from 1951 to 2011. Yet it is still the country's largest employment source and a significant piece of its overall socio-economic development. Crop yield per unit area of all crops has grown since 1950. Due to the special emphasis placed on agriculture in the 5-year plans to steady improvements in irrigation, technology, application of modern agriculture practices and provision of agriculture credit and subsidies since the Green Revolution in India. India receives an average annual rainfall of 1,208 millimeters per year. India is the largest producer of milk, jute and pulses and has the world's second largest cattle population of with 17 crore animals in 2011. It is the second largest producer of rice, wheat, sugarcane, cotton and groundnuts, as well as the second largest fruit and vegetable producer, accounting for 10.9% groundnut, 10.9% to 8.6% of the world's fruit and vegetable production, respectively. India is also the second largest producer and the largest consumer of silk, producing 77,000 tons in 2005. India is the largest exporter of cashew kernels and cashew nut shell liquids. At around 15 lakhs 30,000 square kilometers, India has the second largest amount of arable land after US, with 52% of total land under cultivation. Manufacturing industry around for 26% of GDP and employs 22% of the total workforce is in industry. The industrial sector underwent the significant changes due to the 1991 economic reforms, which removed import restrictions, brought in foreign competition, led to the privatization of certain government-owned public sector industries, liberalized the foreign direct investment (FDI) regime, improved infrastructure, and led to an expansion in the production of fast-moving consumer goods. Post-liberalization, the Indian private sector was faced with increased domestic and foreign competition, including the threat of cheaper Chinese imports. It is also the world's second largest coal producer, the second largest cement producer, the second largest steel producer, and the third largest electricity producer. Defense. With strength over 13 lakhs active personnel, India has the third largest military force and the largest volunteer army. The total budget sanctioned for the Indian military for the financial year 2019 to 2020 was 3.01 trillion. Defense spending is expected to rise up to $62 billion by 2022. Electricity sector. Primary energy consumption of India is the third largest after China and US, with 5.3% global share in the year 2015. Coal and crude oil together account for 85% of the primary energy consumption of India. India's oil reserves meet 25% of the country's domestic oil demand. India is the fourth largest consumer of oil, and net oil imports were nearly 8,200 billion billion rupees. US dollar is 100 billion in 2014 to 15, which had an adverse effect on the country's current account deficit. The petroleum industry in India mostly consists of public sector companies such as Oil and Natural Gas Corporation (ONGC), Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited (HPCL), Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited (BPCL), and Indian Oil Corporation Limited (IOCL). There are some major private Indian companies in the oil sector such as Reliance Industries Limited (RIL), which operates the world's largest oil refining complex. India became the world's third largest producer of electricity in 2013 with a 4.8% global share in electricity generation, surpassing Japan and Russia. By the end of calendar year 2015, India had an electricity surplus with many power stations idling for want of demand. The utility electricity sector had an installed capacity of 303 gigawatts as of May 2016, of which thermal power contributed 69.8, hydroelectricity 15.2, other source of renewable energy 13%, and nuclear power 2.1%. India meets most of its domestic electricity demand through its 10,600 crore tons of proven coal reserves. India is also rich in certain alternative sources of energy with significant future potential such as solar, wind, and biofuels. India's dwindling uranium reserves, stagnated to growth of nuclear energy in the country for many years. Recent discoveries in the Tammalpalle belt may be among the top 20 natural uranium resources worldwide. Engineering. Electricity is the largest subsector of India's industrial sector by GDP and the third largest by exports. It includes transport equipment, machine tools, capital tool, goods, transformers, switchgear, furnace, and cast and forged parts for turbines, automobiles, and railways. The industry employs about 40 lakh workers. On a value added basis, India's engineering subsector exported 67 billion worth of engineering goods in the 2013 to 14 fiscal years and several part of the domestic demand for engineering goods. The Indian automobile industry is the world's fourth largest by production. The engineering industry of India includes growing car, motorcycle, and scooters industry and productivity machinery such as tractors. Gems and jewelries. India is one of the largest centers for polishing diamonds and gems and manufacturing jewelry. It is also one of the two largest consumers of gold. After crude oil and petroleum products, the export and import of gold, precious metals, precious stones, gems, and jewelry accounts for the largest portion of India's global trade. The industry contributes about 7% of India's GDP. Infrastructure. India's infrastructure and transport sector contributes about 5% of its GDP. India has a road network over 54 lakhs 72,144 kilometers, around 55 lakhs kilometers of road as of 31 March 2015, the second largest road network in the world, only behind United States. Qualitatively, India's roads are a mix of modern highways and narrow, unpaved roads and are being improved. As of 31 March 2015, 87.05% of Indian roads were paved. India has the lowest kilometer land road density per 1 lakh people among G27 countries, leading to traffic congestion. The Indian railway network is the fourth largest rail network in the world, with a track length of 14,500 kilometers and 7,172 stations. This government-owned and operated railway network carried an average of 2.3 crores passengers a day and over 100 crore tons of freight in 2013. India has a coastline of 7,500 kilometers with 13 major ports and 60 operational non-major ports, which together handle 95% of the country's external trade by volume and 70% by value, most of the remainder handled by air. Nhava Sheva, Mumbai is the largest public port, while Mundra is the largest private seaport. The airport infrastructure of India includes 125 airports, of which 66 airports are licensed to handle both passengers and cargo.